Hello. Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. Each week we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation together about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season we're going to be focusing on horror subgenres and how they've changed over time. Hope you enjoy it, and thanks for listening. All right, so we're 5 episodes. This is number 5 into our mini season about zombie movies and how they have evolved and changed over time. And I've really enjoyed this. I feel like I've learned a lot. I feel like it's been fun to kind of like track it over time. I got a chance to talk about one of my all-time favorite movies, 28 Days Later. I developed a new appreciation for another great movie, Night of the Living Dead. And this week we're going to throw a little bit of a curveball.
I like it. I don't know what we did.
So far, we've mostly been talking about the history of zombie movies in the United States. And as it turns out, the United States, according to my research, not the only place where zombie movies have been made.
What?
Yep, did some digging, verified my sources. Turns out, not just the U.S.
Wait. Hold on. Are you sure?
I'm quite sure. And in fact, I'm quite excited to talk about some non-U.S. zombie movies today. But before I do that, in the previous episodes, we've kind of given a little bit of a recap of how the zombie genre has changed and evolved over time and some of the important movies in it. So I'm going to do a little bit of the same thing with like the non-U.S. zombie thread. You ready for this?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. In the late 1970s and the 80s, there was kind of a weird period where Italian zombie movies were a big deal, and they were both very erotic and very violent. George Romero's Dawn of the Dead was released in 1978, and in Italy it was released with the title Zombie, Z-O-M-B-I. And then, without Romero's involvement, in Italy, in the following year, director Lucio Fulci released a movie called Zombie 2, which was billed as a sequel, but basically ignored everything from the original, had no involvement with George Romero, and took things straight back to Caribbean voodoo zombies. But it was very successful financially. So after that, after the model was kind of proven to be profitable, we basically had the era of like Italian spaghetti westerns, but for zombies. And this has been called the zombie exploitation era, as the movies were extremely gory and often graphically sexual. Which is just a weird mix of things in my mind. Those Italians.
You did that good.
Yeah. That was the moneymaker at the time. So.
I mean, and still.
Well, yeah, fair. But not all non-US and non-English zombie movies have been smut, though. Especially since 28 Days Later, there's been an explosion of creativity and quality in zombie films from all over the world. Many of these movies introduce new twists to the genre and feel like fresh creative horror expressions while still staying true to the subgenre. One example that we've talked about before, and I think most of our audience has probably seen, is Train to Busan. Turns out a lot of other people have seen it too. In 2016, it made almost $100 million on a less than $10 million budget. And that's huge, not just for a zombie movie, but for a non-English movie in general. And so I feel like Train to Busan really sort of set up a template for financial success, even like from a distribution model and stuff, for non-US horror movies, and especially zombie movies, because that's what it was. So there are a ton of examples that we could talk about that have come along, in the past 10 years or so. But there's even an earlier one that we're going to focus on today. And we did an episode on this movie a long time ago, but coming back to it sort of from the perspective that we have now after digging into the way that zombie movies have developed over time, I thought it would be worth talking about again and it's called Wreck, and it's a Spanish zombie film from 2007.
That was beautifully put, my friend.
Well, when you get a chance to talk about sexually violent zombies, you go all out.
I am elated. I am just giddy right now.
Yeah. But yeah, in reading about this, I had no idea about this weird, bizarro Italian fork of the George Romero movies that kind of took on a life of their own. Like, that's just such a random cultural thing.
Yeah, man.
Like, it makes sense. I don't have trouble believing it. How have I not known about this before?
Right. I feel like it makes sense from the point of view of spaghetti westerns for me, a Western fan. So, Clint Eastwood, have you ever heard about how he got into spaghetti westerns in Italy?
I really thought you were going to say, have you ever heard about Clint Eastwood?
Do you know this guy named Clint Eastwood?
Yeah, the name sounds familiar. But
Yeah. Basically, like, getting into those, like, he accepted the film because it was like, it's vacation kind of thing. Like, he was still not the Clint Eastwood I know, I guess I should say. And so he went over there. I guess by the time he got back, it was pretty huge success. And, he was like really popular star. So like he kind of stumbled upon it. And I feel like that kind of makes sense from the point of view of like, I think a lot of us just stumbled upon spaghetti westerns and now spaghetti zombie films, whatever we want to call them, or the zombie exploitation era, if from what you were saying. But I feel like we kind of all stumbled upon it, and a few of us were like, what is this beautiful creation that is happening on the other side of the world right now?
Yeah.
And the others were the ones who were like, oh, this is too vulgar, whatever. But,
you're just like, I didn't realize I was Italian.
Yeah, exactly. I love spaghetti.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I just want to point out, I think the movie, the second Dawn of the Dead, wasn't spelled ZOMBI 2, like the number 2. I don't think there's an E if our listeners are looking it up. I think there's...
Yeah, in the Italian version, there's no E on either one.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point that out for the listeners, just in case you want to look it up and you didn't know ZOMBI.
Yes.
Yeah.
ZOMBI and ZOMBI 2, even though it was not an officially licensed sequel.
I love it. I love it.
And was not, anything even in the same universe, but yeah.
Yeah, so basically, Lucio was like, hey, different area code, different copyright rules, bitch.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. And he made a lot of money off of it.
Smart guy.
Yeah, different world. But anyway, so today we're going to talk about Wreck. Wreck is a movie that I had fond memories of, but that I think I only saw the one time that we recorded the episode about it. So it was nice to go back and revisit, and it definitely held up for me. And, like I've said with, I think, all of the movies so far this season, going back to it made me appreciate it more.
Yeah.
And so I am excited to talk about it with you today.
Yeah, I'm stoked.
So yeah, I'll do a quick introduction for anybody that wants some additional info about the movie, and then we will get into the shaky cam zombie infection details.
I'm glad that you come up with those, because I was going to say the zombie tits details.
I'm just going to blame that on your Italian heritage. In 2007, Filmax brought us Wreck, a Spanish found-footage zombie horror film directed by Jaime Balaguerro and Paco Plaza. This movie tells the story of a local reporter in Barcelona who is filming a news piece about life in a fire station. What starts off as a boring human interest piece quickly turns into an interesting story about human pieces. See what I did there? After the fire department is dispatched to respond to an emergency at an apartment building. Spoiler warning, that emergency is a zombie outbreak. This movie was made on a budget of $2 million and made about $32 million at the box office. It has currently spawned 3 sequels and can be streamed at no extra cost for Prime members on Amazon Prime Video.
Jaume. That's how you pronounce it, the director's name.
Is that not what I said?
I wasn't listening.
Neither was anyone else. But yeah, so one reason that I thought this would be a good one to talk about is we've talked in previous seasons about how we have sort of our horror subgenres, which, are things like zombies or monsters or witches or paranormal or slasher or whatever. And then there are also, I guess, kind of like film subgenres that are a little more cross-cutting, which would be things like found footage or teen movie or whatever. Mm-hmm. So this one is kind of a mix of found footage, and it did some things that I think were really good as a found footage movie, but it also is a zombie movie in another language in a different culture. And I feel like all of those ingredients came together to create a movie that stands out in my mind when I think back on notable zombie movies that I watched in the past.
I think this film definitely had some really good things to do with found footage, but also some really frustrating things. I just want to put that out there.
Good. It's about time we had a little controversy. Because, real talk, I'm going to bring it next week. So if you want to be the bad guy this time around, I'll stay positive and you can turn heel.
I don't even know what we're doing next week.
It's okay. It's okay. Anyway. So I would agree this movie started real slow. My notes from the beginning of this movie are basically like 3 lines until the part where they actually get to the old woman's apartment and go to do the investigation. And that's where it got a lot more interesting to me. But I almost feel like in the beginning, it was kind of trying to disarm you by being a little bit corny and boring. And even like the actress who was like the news reporter was like conveying that she was really bored with the story and thought it was stupid. And it really was. It was kind of hard to watch. Like it was almost long enough that I was about to start fast forwarding, but then it kind of got into it. And it was like that shift, from being completely bored to being excited that something's finally happening to being completely terrified because what's happening is so bad that it makes you wish you were bored again. I feel like it's kind of effective to take you on that journey as far as like ramping up the intensity.
Yeah, and that was one thing. I know I touched base on the first when we recorded this first time, but the main actress in this, she's an actual like Spanish TV host, and they wanted that to make it seem more authentic, like it was like a legit thing. That's why they which is super common with found footage films, but I feel like, but they like to cast like unknown or like smaller, lesser known actors for their films to make it seem more realistic. Blair Witch, definitely did that, and for this one they did something very similar. But what they also did was use an actual TV host to try to give that off just the extra intensity. But for me, that meant that she did what she needed to, like while recording at the beginning, because at the very beginning, they're in the firehouse and all that. And that all looked actually like a recording because she's so used to, looking at the camera, not looking at the person, the cameraman, that kind of thing. So I think that kind of helped, but it was like the content, like it was like pretty boring, but thankfully it wasn't ridiculously long,
Right. Yeah. No, and you make a good point. It did feel very like convincing, like very authentic as trying to like, just local reporter. And I think that you're right in that it does give you kind of that sense of reality. I think that by virtue of having seen it before, maybe I was already primed to not feel that way. Mm-hmm. So if I've seen it for the first time, maybe that part doesn't feel as long. Maybe it's more like, wait, what's about to happen next? Like, is this just another normal movie?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is definitely a film where where it's getting to. And so that beginning piece, for whatever reason, because of the content that's in there or whatever, it is just dull, you know?
Yeah.
But granted, it's like how you got to explain what's going on. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the vast majority of the movie takes place inside this apartment complex. And so the reporter and her cameraman are doing this human interest piece in the firehouse. They get dispatched. They go along with them. They're in an apartment building where they find an old woman who attacks people, and she's like bleeding and seems to be kind of out of her mind. And then when they go back downstairs to leave, they've been locked inside and the building has basically been quarantined. And the fact that that happened so early in the movie, because I did not remember that, I was just like, how do we still have like an hour of this if they're already locked inside the building? Mm-hmm. But kind of like the way that we've talked about how with horror movies, it can be really effective to have a small number of characters that you get to know really well. Mm-hmm. And to almost like limit yourself on where they're going and what they can do adds to like the suspense in the horror. And I feel like this movie, you know, on a relatively smaller budget, obviously not on super great technology, you know, as far as, you know, camera quality, filming, editing, sound, like any of that stuff. This didn't feel like, you know, a big Hollywood movie. But they really used some techniques that I thought were interesting to make it feel bigger. Like when the woman was on the phone with her husband and then she's telling everyone like, oh yeah, he's outside and he says that the police have the building surrounded and that the streets are blocked off and that there's all this other stuff going on. Like you would get these outside reports that made you think about more things that were happening sort of like on a larger scale. And I just think everything about the way they manage like the pace, the way they would add additional information, the way that they would like show new parts of the building, took what seems like a really simple and boring premise and kept it interesting the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yet again, it's the partially it has to be influenced like Dawn of the Dead. I've talked about this last couple episodes, like Evil Dead. Sometimes it's definitely okay to have a smaller set, especially if it fits within the budget. Otherwise, that's when you have like really bad CGI happening. Just in my experience of watching these.
Peninsula.
yes, you get me. But at the same time, like you got to give them like a ton of credit for that idea as well.
Absolutely.
Because even though it had been, you know, that's not, you know, a secret. It's just like the thought of like there is mayhem going on, but all you really have to do to make it look like mayhem's going on is a couple spotlights, you know, swirl,
exactly.
You know, no disrespect to the film. It's just like that's smart. Like I legit, I think that's cool, and really kind of interesting idea because it's almost contained in a way, and everything that's happening is in this building. You're stuck, you know, as well. Like there's multiple layers to what they did. And I like to think they put it all together before they made it, and we're just like, this is the film, this is the storyline. But who knows? Maybe it was just it. One of them was good because the other option. What I mean by that is maybe the idea of like they're stuck, they can't go out, they can't really go in, like they're just stuck, was because they just wanted to record in one building. That's all they had money for. I don't know.
Yeah, but regardless, I think, you know, being able to create the movie within the boundaries of what your budget allows and pull it off well is a skill that is very hard to come by. Yeah. And this movie is a good example of that. And so, you know, I don't typically read a lot about, you know, the creativity of Spanish filmmaking, and that may just be because I'm not in like the target market for that. But I feel like this one was done just incredibly well, and like this movie holds up as a horror movie, not just as a Spanish horror movie. You know what I mean?
Agreed. Yeah.
So, but another thing I really liked about it, kind of talking about the creativity, was just all the stuff they did with the camera. And sometimes that was really effective. Sometimes it was just kind of annoying and unnecessary. Like when the little girl is playing with the camera and she turns it on and she smudges the lens, and then they're like standing there next to it talking, and it's just like on the guy's shoes for a while. Mm-hmm. I was like, okay, I get it. I see what you're doing here. I get it. But let's keep things moving. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so the heel that I'm supposed to be for this, that's my biggest, that's what I meant by like the found footage just wasn't, there were some problems. That's what I was talking about specifically. Like there were times where it was just like, why the hell did you add this in?
Yeah.
You're wasting time. It doesn't add anything to the story. You know, I'm looking behind to see like maybe they're just like trying to like talking about when the girl smudges the camera. Uh-huh. That and then also like if you're watching a film and you can tell the cameraman is literally just like rolling his wrist back and forth to make it shaky, it just annoys me. Like, I get there's going to be shakiness happening. I get that for sure. But like, if it's constant, like towards the end, it was just like a constant shake. And I get that they're running and all this, and he's breathing heavy, the cameraman. But like, at some point, you got to slow it down. Yeah. Like, you just got to. So that's the beef with the found footage. You know, I love found footage.
Yeah. I think there were also some good uses, though. Like, there's the scene where they're like climbing up on the desk in the room next to the medical room.
Yeah.
And they're like holding the camera up to shoot through like that high up window and spy on like the health inspector.
Yeah.
And you can see the zombies and stuff. And it's just like that idea of like you're watching a thing on camera that you're not supposed to be seeing, and like you're getting away with it, like that thing's being captured.
Yeah.
Like that I thought was just crazy effective, and also a creative way to shoot that scene.
Yeah, I mean, what ended up happening with the camera itself, the camera that's making this found footage film, it ended up being like a weapon, you know, or, well, a weapon, I mean, utility. Yeah. It became a tool. Right. There was a weapon. They used it for light, you know, they used it for night, but just all the above. And yeah, so that was like the brilliant part of this found footage. Like, they weren't just holding a camera, like it was like integral part of the story as well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And one of my, or what I think was one of the best, most intense scenes was kind of like towards the end when the lights go out, and then all they had was like the spotlight from the camera.
Oh yeah, dude.
So like before the night vision, like that part where they're basically just walking around using this thing as a flashlight in the dark in this building that, you know, is infested with zombies.
Yep.
That was so intense. And I really liked, kind of to your point, the idea of the way the camera was really integrated into the story. It wasn't just an observer.
Yeah, I think that's, I think it definitely adds to the suspense. I don't know for sure, but I don't think this film would have been nearly as good if it was anything other than found footage. Like, they needed that found footage. Yeah. They needed the camera in the face of, you know, the zombies that they're hitting back and stuff. Like, they needed that piece, and I don't think you could have done that good enough without doing found footage.
Yeah, it really put you in the headspace of the character, like the cameraman. So there were a few scenes that really stood out to me where this was effective. Like when the mom was handcuffed to the stairs and the zombies are like lifting the garage door and the survivors are getting overpowered and then finally give up and just run up the stairs, and she's like yelling and the zombies come out and just like straight up attack the mom, but the camera is like running up the stairs away from it all.
Yeah.
And like scared. Like the intensity of that moment I thought was just excellent. And then the scene where they ended up getting like the key ring, like with all the keys to the building. And then they make it up to the penthouse and they have all those keys and they have to try and figure out the right one by flashlight as the zombies are running up the stairs after them. And you're just seeing it all like through the camera trying to light things up. Like that was really, really intense. And I think that by virtue of being like in the middle of it, seeing from the point of view of the character that was in danger, it really made it even more like on a different level.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other thing that this film adds, there's something with filming people, like with interviews and stuff like that. You'll watch like the news and you see these people who are talking and they're just really opening up about it. And there's like an actual psychological thing with that. I don't know. It's way over my head. Basically like where people are willing to open up almost like they're the star of the show in a way. And I feel like found footage, like even though we're not the ones watching it, or even though we're not the ones in it, like we still in a way kind of understand that piece, like why the camera's, I guess, still on and still going and all that. Like there's almost like an honest kind of addition to it with the cameras. But the main thing that I just liked is the fact that although it does get annoying, look at the shoes, like it's almost like a piece. It's almost like we're hiding in a closet, hearing what's going on behind the doors. Like we're hearing things that we shouldn't have because we are the people who are in the film because it's the found footage. Like it's like our view, right? Yeah. Of that. You know, like with Halloween, I remember saying I like seeing from the bad guy's eyes, you know, in a way. And I like being put in that. And you know, they definitely did that. It's just, they just lingered too long on some scenes, like the shoes or the smudge, things like that kind of tick me off. But the counter to that is the fact that it gets you into places you shouldn't be. You can reach above a door and stick it through a window to, see what's going on the other side of the wall. Like there's a lot of stuff to that tool.
Put it up into the attic for a jump scare.
Exactly. Yeah. Sons of bitches. So I just I feel like there's just more to this than just like a found footage zombie film. And I'm going to give them credit like that's the case. Yeah. Like they did all that on purpose.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one thing that I think makes this like stand out in my mind is just that it felt like it was not like swinging for the fences, but like it really was embracing everything that it was doing. Yeah. And nothing that it was doing felt like a limitation or like they had to like manage around it. So
when you were watching this though, and Manu goes down, even though you watched this multiple times, did you still have like a feeling of defeat? Like, like he's gone, because I had that for some, like it was super strong this time too. Yeah. And I just really kind of fixated on that. Like after he, all that went down, I was just like, oh, they immediately, like it seemed like as soon as that happened, they didn't lose hope, but they were just lost. They didn't really have that leader, that direction, the general to follow through the war. So, I like that piece, I guess, too.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know, in talking about, what does this contribute to the subgenre or, how does it relate to all the other stuff we've been talking about this season? I think this one is worth talking about just because in the late 2000s, this felt like a really fresh and original zombie movie at a time when we were pretty saturated with zombie stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that one thing that kind of stood out as maybe a little bit of a creative difference outside of like the filmmaking, right? Like the way the story was presented was their explanation for how the zombies got to be. And it was kind of mixed almost with, I don't want to call it like Catholic lore, but it was placed like in the universe of the way Catholicism sees the spiritual world.
Yep.
And like providing a, more, I guess, scientific or natural explanation for it, which is a thing that I don't really feel like I've seen in other zombie movies. And so it was just interesting to me that it almost had that like, and we also love The Exorcist, but this is the movie we wanted to make. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually glad you brought that up because that was definitely something that there were multiple times throughout this film where, there were multiple times where that kind of came up and I thought to myself, which I probably should have watched Quarantine to verify, but it's like, I don't seem to remember that being such a topic in Quarantine. Almost like it's tied specifically to Rec, and their nationality and the religion, their main religion. It just seemed like that was the piece that was kind of coming up multiple times. That was probably a difference there.
And what is Quarantine?
Quarantine is the 2008 remake from America.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it like the one that came out the year after, basically,
in a different country as a sequel, but with a slightly different name and totally different storyline.
Well, yeah, I think this is a straight up remake.
Way more graphic. Yeah. Way more sexual.
less graphic. Oh no, you're right. Yeah, no, 100%. I love it.
We got him back.
Bastards.
But yeah, this one was really fun to go back to. I enjoyed it a lot. Not going to lie, after like the first 20, 25-ish minutes, I was like, oh crap, did I pick a dud? But then it really picked up for me after that. Yeah. So yeah. I enjoyed seeing it again. And it did still just kind of feel like its own thing and fresh and not just a, rinse and repeat remake of other horror zombie movies. So. Yeah.
Which I think that's the piece that's super important because we watched one when we were all camping that one time or at the cabin. I don't remember what it was called. It was on Netflix. It was a found footage zombie film. It was newer. You remember what it was called?
I think it's called like either Alive or #Alive or something.
Yeah, something like that. And this one just, if you're gonna watch a found footage zombie film, watch this one. That's all I'm saying. Don't watch Quarantine. Don't watch the #Alive. Just watch this one. Like, it's legit. like you're saying, it's very, maybe not for the first time, like you were saying earlier, but it starts off slow, but it gets a lot better. I recommend everyone watch it. I'm glad you picked it out. Actually, when I saw it on the list, I was like, hell yes, give me another reason to watch this.
So yeah, good excuse to come back to this one. I would encourage anybody that's a fan of zombie movies to look outside of your own borders, whatever country you may be in, because other countries have a lot to offer in this subgenre as well. Especially Italy in the 80s.
Stick around next week for our next episode.
Yep. Next week we will be back with the thrilling finale to our mini-series about zombie movies. And we are going to be talking about something that's been happening that's very exciting in the zombie world at the time of this recording in 2023.
Ooh.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
We are recording Rec.
You might be. I haven't decided what I'm doing yet.
Recording's already started.
I can talk about anything I want.
You can anyways. It's podcast.
All right, here's the thing.
Poopies.
No, there's actually something I was going to bring up that I knew would set you off, but now I can't remember what it was. It'll come to me. I'll bring it up mid-episode. That'll be better. That's all either of us think about, I'm pretty sure.
Don't take away the thing I love.
Don't got to bring up the thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. I don't have a great idea on how to wrap this up, but I'll just go for it.
I got it.
Okay.
At your heaviest, how much did you weigh?
That is currently.
No way.
Yeah.
114?
No.
Okay.
I wish.
I don't really have an ending. I don't know how to do it.